Welcome to Clean Slate by Desjardins, the podcast where there are no awkward money questions. I'm Jessica Moorhouse, and in each episode, we're going to take a look at the turning points in people's lives and explore young Canadians answering those big existential questions about their journeys and their finances. It's time to go beyond the money and see how these big questions impact everything that we do. Clean Slate is by Desjardins, a cooperative who is on a mission to enrich people's lives. They're about more than just money. They're a financial institution that believes in the spirit of community. And today, I'm speaking with Jamil Abiad. Welcome, Jamil. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm excited too. You have such an interesting story, and I feel like so many people watching, young kids or even parents who have kids who are interested in putting them in sports, they're going to learn a lot from your experience, because you have the experience of being, a kid going through, athletic programs, then becoming a pro athlete, and now you're a coach. So you've kind of seen all sides of things. So I kind of want to start with a better understanding kind of your origin story. How did you eventually become a pro athlete? And was it what you expected when you first started? Where you ended up?
Well, I started playing basketball pretty late compared to most people. Mm-hmm. I started at the age of 13. I played soccer my whole life prior, and I was really good at soccer. So my mom was pretty pissed when I switched over to basketball. But I had a mentor, somebody who actually was our babysitter at the time, my brothers and I, who he himself played professional basketball. And whenever, we had a chance to go outside or take us to the YMCA and stuff like that, we would play. And just being, I guess, an athlete, I was pretty fast. I could run, I could jump and do all the other things that most athletes can do at a decent level. I caught on to basketball pretty quick. But I also liked the competitive aspect of it because it was something new. And typically basketball is a tall person's sport.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite there yet. Still growing. But a lot of people told me, I shouldn't switch. I should continue playing soccer. I'm going to struggle in basketball. So I think just having all those naysayers kind of fueled me to continue to try and prove them all wrong. Mm-hmm. So it was the summer of grade 9, grade 10, where I took basketball pretty serious. And I was like, okay, I want to see how far I can get with this. And I pretty much trained every single day and tried to join teams and leagues and all that other stuff. And by grade 12, I was a 4-time city all-star back in Ottawa. I started getting some visibility from coaches in the city and a little bit around. And by grade 12, I decided to come back for a 5th year of high school, just because I was like, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. And I thought that extra year would help me develop as a basketball player better, just because I started so late. So after my 5th year, I went to Bishop's University, where I played basketball there for 5 years. It was a lot tougher than I would have assumed and thought. But, during those 5 years, I was able to grow, develop. I got into fitness a little bit. I worked on my body because I was super tiny coming into university. For anybody going to university now, it's probably impossible to go in like I did. I was 5'10", 155 pounds. It's pretty impossible to do that now. But so I knew I had to get stronger and just worked on my body and all that other stuff. By my 5th year, I started getting contacted by agents from overseas, typically more Lebanon, because that's where my dad is from. And I played for 3 years. And while I was doing that, I started kind of thinking of other ways to prepare myself for what's to come after.
I'm wondering, is that because once you, maybe even your experience in university and then going pro, you're like, this is very different than what I envisioned it would be to be a pro? What was it like, and what did you think it would be like when you were younger?
I mean, when you're younger, you think as soon as you make a pro, you're pretty much set for life.
Yeah.
You think you're going to be making millions of dollars and all the stuff that you see on TV. I mean, NBA players, and they talk about their journeys or stories, and you never really hear about the grind and the struggles and all the craziness that happens behind the scenes, right? You only hear what, I guess, the media or what they're physically telling you. So going into my first year, and you're getting your first contract and looking at it and you're like, wait a minute, it's only like $4,000 or $5,000. Like, what is this? Mm-hmm. Right? And you're thinking like it's supposed to be like 100,000s or more. But then you quickly realize, like, depending on where you are in the world, every pro league has different tiers. If you're playing in the top leagues, obviously that's when you're going to start making more six figures and higher. But the lower leagues, like, there's some people who are making, 1,000 or even a little bit less, depending on where they're playing. But it's a grind, and that's what a lot of athletes feel they have to go through to get there. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just don't. You could be playing for 9, 10, 11 years and you barely get to that top tier, right? So I think like the whole vision growing up to what it actually was when I was finally, I guess, in that whole thing, mm-hmm. was a lot different.
Well, how did you personally manage your finances to kind of make it work when you were overseas? And what were some of the things that you saw other players do that you're like, I don't want to make that mistake?
Yeah, so everyone makes a certain amount of money. Like, no two players are making mm-hmm. kind of the same. So depending on obviously how much you're making, you may be able to do a little bit more than somebody else, right? But for me, I was just finishing school and then I went right into playing professionally. So all the money that I was getting, I was like, okay, I still have bills at home. I still got to not pay for school and all that other stuff, where I wasn't able to spend as much money or do maybe as many things as I wanted to do when I was overseas. So I think that also kind of put a little bit more into perspective mm-hmm. for me, because maybe if I didn't have those bills and other things to pay for, I may have splurged more and maybe been hurt in the long run. And then on the flip side, I did have teammates and stuff like that who were getting quite a bit of money. And I still remember, the first thing they do is we get our pay at the end of the month. First stop was always Western Union. Send money home mm-hmm. to family. Some of these guys have kids and wives and stuff at home, so they do that. And then on the same night, we would go out. And for me, going out, I might spend $100, $200.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are spending thousands of dollars. So that's for me where kind of like the alarming factor was coming, especially because after like a week or two, they were asking for like an early payment from mm-hmm. our president, our team staff and stuff like that too. So that's where I was like, you just got paid like 10 grand or 20 grand. Like, how's it gone? So I knew I definitely didn't want to do that. But then again, back to, having that mentor and someone in my ear all the time. And I knew that I wanted to eventually do something or build something later. So I was like, okay, I need to put at least a certain amount of money aside, just so I don't run into any difficulties or issues later. And I still had to pay for a car at home. I still had to pay my school tuition and all that other stuff too. So I think that kind of helped me, but also seeing how they were kind of allocating and spending their money kind of put things into perspective for me, because 10 grand sounds like a lot right now, but mm-hmm. it could literally be gone in the same day.
It sounds like you really want to make sure that the money that you did set aside would do the opposite. You didn't want to spend it. You wanted to make sure you can build it into something. And that's what led you to start your own organization, Team Believe. Do you want to kind of talk about when you made that decision to kind of maybe put your pro athlete aspirations on pause and go in a different direction, do a big pivot and start your own thing? What was that transition like?
I think the transition, I thought it was going to be difficult at first, mm-hmm. but I think because I was still involved in basketball, it kind of felt like second nature. So while I was still like, coming back and forth from playing overseas, like I was still doing camps, clinics, I was still kind of coaching and stuff like that. So once I definitely, when I stopped playing, I was like, okay, I know I want to train, I know I want to coach. How can I combine the two? I was like, I think it's time for me to build another organization in Ottawa. We have other programs and stuff like that too, but how can I make it where they're getting, it's kind of like a one-stop shop, essentially, where they're getting a lot of things at once and not just basketball, because eventually the basketball stops dribbling, right? And how can we help these young kids become men and take all these tools and kind of help them grow and for me, I was like, okay, so what did I need when I was younger? And I was like, okay, so social media today is huge. You know, you could be a celebrity within a couple hours. So I'm like, okay, so I want to involve that in my program. So all of our games are recorded. We try to make highlight tapes for all of our players. I'm in constant contact with coaches all over the country, trying to get our guys recruited. And then what leagues can we be put in that they can get a lot of exposure from as well. We've also added an athletic trainer. We have a nutritionist. Eventually, you know, we're trying to tie in financial literacy and stuff like that too, just because, you know, they're going to have to learn how to use their finances and stuff later on as well while they're in school as well. You know, they're not going to always have mom and dad there to kind of help them with their finances, whether they're getting a student loan and stuff like that too. It's still money that's physically being put in your pocket, right? I think if I can teach them at a younger age, it's only going to benefit them later on. And not all of them are going to continue to be university athletes. Only, you know, a certain few eventually make it there. So how can I help the majority be better after?
Going back to the costs, there's different sports out there, different costs involved. And I think, you know, originally basketball used to be kind of one that was a fairly easy entry point, not super expensive compared to some other sports out there that have lots of equipment and things like that. But now it's getting a little bit more expensive. What are some things that maybe you teach or talk to parents about if they want to put their kids in sports to be aware of?
Yeah, it gets tricky because there are so many different factors, right? And the biggest thing that makes sports expensive, and I'll just use basketball and soccer because they're probably the least equipment-based sports, is as you start getting higher into competitive levels, all the travel adds up.
Well, since there's so many costs involved in, like, you know, running your organization and the different programs that you run, you know, how do you find the money to pay for them? Like, how do you fundraise, for example? What are kind of the things that you do so you do have, you know, the funds to pay for everything? Yeah.
So at the beginning of the year, you know, after we figure out kind of how many leagues we want to be in, tournaments, and, you know, what we physically want to get throughout the year, you know, we try to calculate everything, get a total, and then divide it by the amount of players we have. And then, you know, every single year you're going to have 2 or 3 players, or even a little bit more, depending on that specific year, of kids that can't maybe afford the full cost or maybe half, or need a payment arrangement and stuff like that too. So we know that coming into every year, right? So we try to do events, whether it's, you know, maybe host a little 3-on-3 tournament, or the year before COVID, we did kind of like raffle baskets where I got like kind of 2 Raptors tickets. We put in a little bit of our own team gear, and, you know, we get the kids to go and sell a bunch of tickets, and all that money kind of we put in a little pot there to help offset any cost that some of these kids can't afford. Because the last thing I want is a kid not to be able to play because they didn't have the financial means. And fundraising has been something that we've definitely look forward to every single year. And we've had parents and stuff like that too who've also stepped in and, you know, contribute a little bit of money as well too, which is always super appreciated and awesome.
I'm curious, since you mentioned, you know, it is a business. Now you run your own business. You're on the other side of things. You're not the athlete. You're the person putting everything together. What were some, like, how did you know all the costs that would be involved in running your own, you know, program?
Yeah, well, I want to say initially, like, I didn't really know the exact costs. You know, there was a lot of trial and error with things. And I did have, again, that same mentor who has kind of his own programs and stuff too, that I was able to kind of learn from while I was around him and see how kind of things moved and what needed adjusting. Or, you know, you may assume like it may cost this, but then once you actually get into it, you're like, oh my God, I forgot to factor in this, and this. So our first year was kind of a little bumpy. Just kind of, we didn't really factor in everything properly, and may have undercharged here and there. And then, you know, you kind of take a small little hit, but that's, I guess, you know, the growth of business and just learning.
What kind of costs like were there? Like what would you expect if someone like wanted to do something like you? What are we talking about? Like uniforms and space that you have to rent?
Yeah. So yeah, uniforms is definitely one, and they're a lot more expensive than you think, especially when you're getting them custom made and stuff like that. Gym rental, insurance, tournament fees, travel costs, per diem for coaches. If you're paying coaches as well, then you add the other tangibles there. So your, athletic trainer that we have, the nutritionist. So all of those are media guy. So all of those people have their own fees that they want to be paid for, right? Too. So you got to factor that into your team fees.
How did you also within the business know how much to pay yourself, because you're an employee of your business, you run the business, and how did you also then know how can I also continue to set myself up personally for success?
I'm still working on that. That's the thing, and I think sometimes I may undervalue myself now, but I always tell myself too that money will always come later. Grow things now, whether you have to take a little bit of a pay cut now and stuff like that too. Eventually, your fruits to your labor are gonna come. And that's something my mom always told me too, and stuff like that too, is don't chase the money right now. If you're enjoying what you do, you're still getting by, continue to do what you're doing, and people eventually will pay you for your work. So for right now, I feel like since I'm still kind of in that new phase with my
growth phase.
Exactly. I'm still taking, if I had to factor in all the hours that I spend and what I'm making at the end of the year for that, it's nowhere close. You're just because I'm not in the gym doesn't mean I'm not doing all the other stuff. And phone calls just to coaches and emails back and forth take hours on its own. So I think the money stuff will come later. And it's something that I've told myself. I'm enjoying the process right now. Seeing the growth in itself is very rewarding.
What has basketball and coaching taught you personally about managing your own personal finances?
It's taught me a lot now, because I'm on the other side of things where now, I got to delegate the finances. I got to pay people. I got to pay coaches. I got to pay tournaments, leagues, my website, all these other things that you never really factor in, right? It's taught me a lot now, because I got to make sure, I have the money aside for all of these bills and all of these things every month or whenever they're due, right? So learning not to, spend and over budget, and kind of, I have a big Excel sheet at home, and I write down all these other things and try to factor in costs and see, can I spend this much this month, or are we going to be short, or what's going to happen here? So I feel like, starting your own business and coaching and all that stuff has definitely helped me manage my finances tremendously, opposed to before when, it was kind of just money comes in and I just splurge and do what I need to do. Now I'm really particular in what I buy and what I spend, and just make sure that, there's always some sort of cushion somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important. And I think coaching has definitely helped me understand and realize how to definitely money manage better.
With your experience from start to finish, what does success now mean to you? What does financial independence mean for you personally?
That's a really good question. I would say, as long as you're comfortable and you really enjoy what you're doing, I think that's what matters the most. You could find somebody who's not as money rich, but still be successful and super happy with what they're doing. And I feel like that's the most important, is that can you wake up every day happy and wanting to go back to work every single day? Or are you going to be the person that has a lot of money, wakes up and are not really looking forward to going to work? So I feel like that's where the median is. And for me, I feel like I would rather get up every single day, go to work content, may not be the richest person, but I'm happy and I can still grow in what I'm doing. And I feel like growth is kind of one of the biggest factors as well, because you always see there's always new things to come, right? And I feel like that's what's also exciting. And for me, that's what I kind of fuel myself on. And I know that I'm eventually going to continue to move up. And I feel like success can be something that also can be achieved in 10 years. It doesn't have to be today, right? So I feel like that to me in a nutshell is how I would kind of see success and money, I guess.
Well, thank you so much, Jameel, for joining me. It was a pleasure chatting with you and learning everything that you've learned over the course of all your years in basketball about money.
No, thank you for having me. This was awesome. Appreciate it.
See, asking questions about money isn't so embarrassing, is it? All you have to do is start the conversation. Now, I made this podcast with Desjardins because they believe that you need to start early to build a solid financial mindset. Good habits lead to great results. There are so many amazing stories out there that help us answer those big questions we all have. But it's really important to talk about these things without taboos or judgment. I hope you really enjoyed this episode with Jameel and you learned a thing or two. Click to listen to the next episode of Clean Slate by Desjardins, the institution who's on a mission to enrich people's lives and build community. Well, that's me signing off, and I hope you'll join me for the next one.